Well, as we move to the afternoon, we're going to get some exciting stuff out on the table with our Audit and Risk Management Committee meeting. First of all, from a call to order, this meeting will pick up here to go through action items associated with the Audit Risk Management Committee for the Board of Regents. Public portions of this meeting are being recorded to aid in the preparation of our minutes. We are scheduled to adjourn at 3:45. Regent Pacheco not here. I will do my best to make sure that we get to 3:45. Suzanne, can you tell anybody that we have out there in virtual land?
Yes, we have Regent Goodyear in Zoom.
Glad to have him there. All right. Thank you. Key items for our agenda include an update from the board office related to the system-wide audit activity and presentations from the universities regarding the current year's internal audit plan, the university's risk assessment activities, and the recommended audit plan for the year 2025. We will then transition into executive session, during which we will discuss the university's institutional risk and IT security. Following that discussion, we will have our reviews of assignments with each of the university's chief auditors.
No, and I'm not sharing that.
Our first order of business is to approve our meeting minutes, namely the public and executive session minutes from May 26, 2022, and the public and executive session minutes from June 1st, 2023. The May 22 executive session minutes were reviewed by members during our June 23 executive session, and no questions or changes were offered to Rick by the members. The June 23rd public session minutes were provided and are in today's agendas book. Are there any questions or corrections regarding the June 2023 public session minutes? Hearing none, I move that the Audit Committee approve the minutes of the May 26, 2022 executive session and the June 1, 2023 public session. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Those in favor say aye. Those
Aye.
opposed
Aye.
say nay. And any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is carried. All right. From an Auditor General activity, our second item today is an update on the system-level audit activities. Brad Kendricks from the board office will provide an update. Brad, you hopefully have what you need.
I do. Thank you, Regent Brewster, Regent Mata. So we usually start this off by talking about the activities of the Auditor General's office as it relates to the three universities and the system office. So we have not had any new audits kick out besides the ongoing activity of the university's financial reports being reviewed each year, and those are starting for the next year right now. We do have several audits that have been outstanding in various capacities for several years, sometimes many years. And I'm happy to say that those continue to move towards kind of a final resolution. So most recently, we closed out the IT security audit that I believe was initiated back in 2018 of the system. And in that audit, the Auditor General has closed out the remaining items for the board office, has already satisfied ASU and NAU's improvements related to IT security and oversight. So they've ultimately been satisfied with the policies we put in place and the processes in order to manage those. I will note that in the final report that they just issued, there were still some remaining IT security items for the University of Arizona that were listed as not yet fully implemented. But I will note that the Auditor General didn't actually follow up with the University of Arizona to see what progress that they have made on those issues since the prior year's report. So the board office has been working with the university to ensure that we continue to track those issues until they are fully resolved. So we'll work with the university's internal audit team as well as their CIO and IT staff to make sure that the board stays informed that those do reach their final conclusion. In addition to that, we have three other open audits of the system. One of those was the commercial real estate development audit that required new policies, new inventory and disclosure, and following that process. At this point, we have reached satisfactory conclusion that we've put those policies in place and that we are starting to demonstrate them. However, the Auditor General is still waiting on the hope that we will have a relevant commercial lease that they can review in order to say that they saw us do the thing that we said that we would do for the last several years. So we continue to work with them to monitor that, but are expecting that when they get around to that audit over the course of the next few months, that it will close out one way or another. Additionally, we have university-affiliated organizations where they had requested some or suggested some policy changes that have been reflected. Similarly, we've been following those policies, but this last audit, they wanted yet one more year of observation. So we're allowing for that, but again, expecting it to be fully resolved. And then the final piece was ABOR sunset factors, which included a number of recommendations specifically around enterprise risk management. And again, we've put those policies in place. We have demonstrated those policies in practice over the course of the last year, and they wanted to see one more cycle. Coincidentally, this meeting is one of those key pieces of evidence that continue to reinforce the importance that risk management and audit planning have at the board level. So we're hoping, again, that when the Auditor General's office catches up on their audit plan for the year, that we'll be able to get these resolved by hopefully the fall. With that, I will turn it over back to Regent Brewster.
Brad, thank you. Any questions from or comments from the rest of the board? All right, hearing none, let's move to our item 3. For agenda items 3, 4, and 5, we will hear about internal audit activities subsequent to our June 23rd meeting. In addition, we will receive commentaries from the university staff regarding enterprise risk, followed by presentations of internal audit risk assessments and FY 2025 audit plans. This committee is tasked by policy to review and approve the university's annual audit plans. After all the university's audit plans have been presented, the committee will consider a single motion to approve all 3 plans. Members should feel free to comment or ask questions at any time during these presentations. ASU, you get the floor first for audit area topic 3. Dr. Morgan Olson, come on forward. And I don't, Dr. Olson, are you going to bring forward anybody else with you today?
Bringing my friend Lisa Grace with me.
Great, I know Lisa, okay. You had quite a list, but Lisa's going to do, I'm sure.
Mike will just come up afterwards.
Yeah.
Just before we start, I want to point out that it's probably to your benefit that Regent Pacheco isn't here, considering you have slides, so
I love the way you roll.
just know you're in friendly territory.
Thank you, Regent Zaragoza. Just for the record, I did not make the slides. I only criticized them. They are beautiful slides, and we recommend them to you.
Well,
So Lisa Grace is my colleague here with me, our Executive Director of University Audits, and I am actually just going to turn most of the show over to her to make the presentation here. But as the chair of the Arizona State University Internal Audit Review Board, I will just say that we have in place the structure and the process that was established by the board several years ago. It is, I think, still considered relatively unique and innovative in the world of higher education internal audit. But, you know, we love innovation at ASU, so it's all good. But it's working well, in my view, and it, I think, allows us to essentially make sure that we have an opportunity to build our sort of our internal culture and to be a learning organization in terms of something happens that wasn't exactly optimal or the way we would like to have happen in one area, that we can share that information with people who are key to leveraging that knowledge in other parts of the enterprise and reducing, you know, risk to the institution and ultimately to the Board of Regents as well. So we think we have a good process in place for doing that. Rick Gefeller is one of the people who sits on our audit review board and certainly can share you with his impressions as well. But I think it's working well, but it's all really driven by what our university audits team does, and Lisa leads that team. So I'm going to turn it over to you for the presentation.
Great, thank you. See if I can get this working. Quick update on our fiscal year 24 audit plan. We've completed 8 projects this year to date, 6 assurance projects in the area of continuity of operations, vendor management, deferred maintenance, research-related conflict of interest, a Salesforce application audit, as well as a financial control audit. We've completed 4 advisory or consulting type activities. We've also completed 4 cycles of our recurring P-card procedures focused on analytics and just overall procedures of the university spend, as well as 4 cycles of our continuous auditing program. From a plan update perspective, we actually added 1 project this year, an additional financial control audit, and we've allocated our management request hours to 2 advisory reviews. I'm happy to say we're fully staffed as of March, which has been a long time coming. And we're on track to substantially complete the fiscal year 24 audit plan by the end of the year with minimal spillover into 25. From a completed project perspective, we had 1 project that had significant issues. It was our continuity of operations audit. The audit focused on unit-level plans across the university and found issues with completeness and relevancy of the plans, including the IT-related information. Specifically, the unit-level plans were incomplete or inconsistent regarding critical functions, staffing requirements, facilities, remote work information, as well as instruction-related detail. Unit plans were also found to be incomplete or inaccurate related to departmental and centrally managed application from a disaster recovery perspective. The emergency preparedness team has developed a comprehensive management plan to address the issues and intends to have that implemented by January of 2025. From a significant issue perspective, we have 1 open issue, the continuity of operations issue that we just discussed. We were able to close out the default system administrator level access related to Sun Devil Athletics. We were also able to reduce the risk for our issue outstanding for vulnerability management related to the work that has been done over the course of the year. We are allowing time, to Brad's comments before, to let those processes actually execute. There were a few of the items still in motion of being implemented related to escalation and some of the remediation actions. So we'll continue to monitor that with the intent of closing it out later in fiscal year 25. From an overall audit issue management perspective, we closed out 27 audit issues over the course of the year. We have 41 current open issues that we're tracking either from an open management plan perspective or that is just waiting our verification. We have several items still in motion of verification testing that we hope to wrap up by the end of the year as well. 23 of those issues are related to items that are 360 days past due, some both open issues as well as management remediated. I'd like to just highlight 16 of those are tied to 3 specific projects, of which 2 are currently being verified through remediation testing, with the other project being addressed as part of our fiscal year 25 audit plan. Otherwise, with that, I'll pause and answer any question on our current status or work completed for year to date.
I have one just with getting the audit team filled. When you look at this very aggressive schedule and you said we will be completed, how much does that full team add to getting things done differently than you had in the past year to 2 years?
So for this year specific, it's a huge impact. We were able to make substantial progress this year, not only finally being fully staffed, but over the course of the last 2 years, we have turned over half of our staff. So I would say for fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 22, we were not only down staff, we had new staff members that we were training, onboarding, which is a sizable effort and quite a long ramp to get up to speed fully. So I think this year we really had the benefit of employees hired in late fiscal year 22 or 23 actually getting up to speed, as well as filling our last remaining director level position.
Fantastic. Any other comments, questions from the board? Thank you, ASU. Thank you for the presentation. And yes, it was a great use of PowerPoint, Dave. Great use. Some things you can't talk to.
So, Mr. Chair, let me just ask here, there are other parts, I think, to each of the institutional presentations. That finishes part 1 of ours. Do you want us to exit and, no, stay? Okay.
We'll move to those now.
Gotcha.
Stay in chair. NAU, you're up next. After.
Yeah, so,
Which you'll do too.
okay, this is going well. Yeah.
We're gonna take Morgan Olson's, we're gonna
Yeah.
do too.
So I think what we're going to do next is that we're going to give the committee a presentation on our ERM, or Enterprise Risk Management Planning process, and address IT security updates. And while we have been laughing about the process, Mike Anderson has joined us here. Some of you, I may have met Mike before, but in addition to being a recovering lawyer, sorry, the lawyers, he is a former FBI agent who served as the, what was the right title, managing agent for two
Special agent in charge.
Special agent in charge. That sounds so much more
Yeah.
professional. For New Orleans and Chicago, and brings that experience base with him to what we're doing here. So,
Welcome to Phoenix.
I was gonna say, those are a
I'm
couple
used to worrying a lot, so risk is the right place for me to be.
and somehow we managed to give him lots of reasons to worry. But what we do try to do is, after we worry, I always refer to this as mining the good from the bad. Some of you may be aware we had a fantastic circumstance a couple of weeks ago where an 8-inch water main on the Tempe campus broke and managed to put 4 feet of water into the ground floor of our central plant, which provides
Nice.
chilling and steam to a good part of this campus of many millions of square feet, which is really great not to have air conditioning, this time of year. And that gave us an opportunity to say, okay, well, what happened? Why did it happen? How are we going to, mitigate that risk for the future? And more importantly, I do want to give credit to our facilities team and our procurement folks who mobilized, and in fewer than 48 hours, we had that plant back up operating. Now, if you go down there, you will find that the central plant is almost completely ringed with modular units of generators and mobile chillers and those sorts of things. And
There's a big run on duct tape.
yeah, it's so
wine.
say your prayers, but just a real life example of the types of things that we try to address through our monthly emergency preparedness meetings that Lisa and Mike and others are all a part of. So with that, Mike, did you want to talk a little bit about process here?
You bet. And a side note, you heard from Lisa about the COOP plans. It's my job to fix that in my team. So I'm happy to report that the ASU Enterprise Risk Program has moved since our last meeting from kind of a pilot phase to full implementation. And so just to remind you, we're still relying on the principles in front of you on how we determine whether or not something's an enterprise risk versus a strategic or a transactional risk. And so we really are still looking at these 5 categories: financial, operational, reputational, safety, and technology. And so every risk that we will attack, if you will, we're up to about 24 right now, we'll all look at this as a starting point. You'll see it as a Venn diagram. If we have a risk that we've identified that's in that middle, and many of them are, then we know we're in the enterprise risk territory and we're in the right spot. So to the right, you see the risk cycle. If you look at 12 o'clock, identification of the risk is the first step for us. Analysis, the analyze component, is probably where we spend the most time, moving from assessing and prioritization, and then also a significant amount of time on the mitigation or acceptance of that risk. And I should also add, we're spending a lot more time on the response resiliency side, which I'll get to on a slide or two. And then the report monitor, that's where my enterprise risk core team, which has grown to 4 auxiliary members, including myself, to report and monitor, get that information up at the executive level. And then, as you are probably well aware, risk cycles just keep turning. It's dynamic, it's fluid. They never stop, unfortunately. And the risk only usually get added, and we rarely will be able to take them off the list. So these are the identified risks. They are laid out but that's intentional in that they are not ranked. At least they're not ranked yet. We haven't heat mapped these risks yet because we have not completed all of our analysis yet. I'll talk a little bit about heat mapping in a few slides. But again, as I mentioned, we're up to 24 identified risks. There's a couple risks that we started out with that were just kind of too much to handle, and we ended up layering them, like lab safety, as you'll see, to chemical, radiological, and biological. Student enrollment, we realized we needed to break out campus immersion, learning enterprise, and Ed+. And so there'll probably be continued layering of risks as we go. Built environment, that's the type of risks associated with deferred maintenance and new infrastructure, that'll probably be layered as well. So we're well into at least 8 of these risks at this point. And now I will move to the Enterprise Risk Working Group that is going to be vital to us shepherding these risks through the system. There on the left, you'll see the core participants. We have key stakeholders at the executive, or should I say just below the executive level, representing all of the different type of risks. If you look at that list, members from each of those areas will have at least one enterprise risk where we've identified as a risk owner. There's going to be some, like enterprise technologies, that's going to have multiple, as well as environmental health and safety. In this core group, obviously my risk team is there, but we have Lisa Grace and Audit represented, as well as Office of General Counsel and Emergency Management. And they have kind of more of an overarching responsibility to kind of connect all of the risks, because they are impacted by every single one of the risks that we've identified. So talk a little bit about the expectations of this group. I mentioned we have a core group of 4 shepherding these risks through the system. The representatives that we've identified in this risk group, we're asking them to be subject matter experts in their area. They have hundreds of years of institutional knowledge, so they can help connect the dots, because we'll see a lot of overlapping risks and connections. We need their help in identifying new risks, refining those risks, and then managing their leadership chain above and below them as we take these risks through the system. So this is the brainstorming tool that we use for all 24 of those risks, and that list will grow, as I mentioned. Here's a sample of one. I've condensed it just for simplicity. This is a completed bow tie framework that we use for radiological lab safety. And this is one of those risks that I mentioned that we had to layer, because it was kind of needed its own separate analysis. So the bow tie framework, how we start our workshops is we focus on that middle section, the middle part of that bow tie, and identify what are those risks and vulnerabilities or sub-risks under the radiological lab safety. There you can see this, like security, spills, releases, inventory. There are a few others that I've not included here, again, just for simplicity's sake. And so we start with that in the workshop, and then we work kind of left to right. So we start on the mitigation side. So picture the risk. You map it over. What are all the things left of boom, if you will, or left of bang, as they say sometimes in the military or in law enforcement? What are all those mitigations that we have in place? We usually ask for our greatest hits of your mitigations, and then what are the gaps associated with those mitigations, and you'll see that will map over. So now brings us back to the middle section, the risk itself. Now we're talking about right of bang or right of boom. So all the mitigations that we had in place and all the gaps that we filled, the risk was still actualized. And now where are we with our resiliency or our response? And so with lab safety, a good example of that is if you have a release of radiological material, what is your resiliency response? Do you have, are you proper regulatory requirements? Are you following lab cleanup procedures? Are you doing testing and training? Are you monitoring cameras? That's all going to be stuff that's going to be kind of that right of bang. And so you're going to have gaps associated with it as well. So that is kind of the tool, and again, we're trying to franchise this out for every single one of our risks. Now we move to kind of the architecture that my team has kind of built out. This is a composite, just for visual's sake. If you look at the top there, that's that risk register. That middle section will tie to that middle section of the bow tie. And then all the way to the left are those categories, and you're going to check those 5 categories that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Those will be checked. And then to the right, we're asking at all levels of the organization or all levels of the risk for them to heat map that particular risk. And so it's really based on it's a formula of likelihood and significance. And then so you'll see that heat map: red, obviously not good; green, we're in pretty good shape; and then yellow, work to do. Then down below, you'll see that risk schedule. All that risk schedule is really pulling all that information over from the bow tie framework. With the addition of it'll have an action plan. The one item that I do not have on here yet, it's still a work in progress, is an executive dashboard. We will have that for the executive level, but they will still have, so Dr. Olson, for example, will have kind of a baseball card, if you will, but he will still have access to the supporting schedule and the risk registers if he wants more information.
Very cool.
And that completes my presentation. Any questions?
Sure.
Chair Moore?
So this is correlated, but it's also risk. So you were a special agent, so were you a counterintelligence?
Well, I was in leadership, so I had all of it.
Okay, so
Criminal, counterintelligence, terrorism.
okay, yeah, since we have the foreign terrorist organization by students, you know, that was a policy that we were discussing this morning by student groups. How do you see the risk? Because most of these things that happen in the world, on campus or anywhere, are very, very silent, and you don't see it until something really, something you can see. So how do you manage that? I know it's audit, but in the way, it's part of what you're doing too, since the presentation covered different areas.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you bring that up because just 2 weeks ago, in the same week, we did a foreign influence workshop as well as an international operations workshop. So between those two workshops and the risk identified within those workshops and the mitigations and the responses, I think we would have a plan to address that. I'm not in that particular area. I'm more of a facilitator in risk management, so I would probably have to defer to either to OGC or to others to answer a more specific question than that. But we do have a framework to address the risks that you've identified.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Great.
There we go.
Thank you.
Clicker.
So Mike and I work closely together, obviously, to ensure that university audit and enterprise risk are closely aligned. As Mike indicated, enterprise risk really focuses on the identification, assessing those risks, prioritizing, mitigating, and then monitoring those. Internal audit comes in to provide assurances on those risk areas as well as overall advising. So as part of the enterprise risk management program, as Mike indicated, I sit on the working group over the overall program. I also participate in the detailed workshops where possible. I use that information really as a direct input into our risk assessment process, along with our other risk assessment activities to ensure that we're guiding our work in the areas of greatest risk and need of the university. From that perspective, our overall risk assessment process has stayed consistent with prior years. You'll see the diagram up there. Key changes that we introduced this year is really expanding our audit universe. So previously, we had auditable units established, which really are a distinct function, process, or department that we would perform a specific audit activity in. From those auditable units, we would do a risk assessment with the key risk factors defined there. So significance to the university, financial impact of control failure, management oversight, the complexity of the unit, regulatory or legal exposure, among a few other items. We use that information really to apply a risk rating to the auditable unit of either critical, high, medium, or low, which helps drive our planned cadence of coverage in those areas. Again, making sure that we're utilizing our resources as efficiently as possible. For critical risk areas, we try to have coverage every 4 years. High risk is every 5, medium is 10, and then low risk, we're probably not ever going to have a planned audit unless there's a specific ask or a specific issue. With that, this year we also defined our auditable entities to be part of the audit universe. Auditable entities are really the colleges or VP units across the university that are responsible for core business decisions, financial, operational, IT, and monitoring controls. Within there, we have 34 defined auditable entities. From a risk assessment process, we really look at those from a data analytics perspective. So financial metrics, operational metrics, as well as the outcome of our annual financial certification process. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to highlight there. Otherwise, our process remained consistent, other than incorporating those in there and changing the audit cadence, as I mentioned. From an audit assumption perspective, our assumptions stayed fairly consistent as well. We build our plan assuming we're fully staffed, and then we back out indirect components that I have listed up there. So paid time off, investigations, management oversight, our quality assurance program that we need to implement on an annual basis. We also have hours allocated for auditors to ensure that the audit team's skills stay appropriate, and that we're learning new skills to support the different areas of the university and different risk areas. We also have a small bucket of hours to implement the changes needed for the revised internal audit standards that are effective in January of 2025. The remaining hours are then allocated to assurance and advisory projects. We try to maintain an allocation of 80% assurance work and 20% advisory work. That'll vary year by year just based off the results of the risk assessment. But overall, that is how our plan is built from an assumption perspective. This year's plan has 10 assurance projects, 4 P-card reviews that are just part of our continuous auditing program, as well as 4 cycles of our continuous auditing program focused on mandatory new hire training. We also have 3 advisory projects and a small bucket of hours for management requests. The gold shading you see there are projects that directly align with the enterprise risk areas that Mike covered as part of his presentation. Our projects cover compliance, operations, financial areas, as well as IT. We'll also integrate IT coverage wherever it makes sense on the other types of projects. So from a compliance perspective, we have one project plan focused on NCAA compliance, focused on recruiting. Operational, we have a special events registry, a strategic partner audit. Again, that's one we try to have on an annual basis, just rotating against critical key partners of the university. We have a construction project focused on a construction project execution, and then a campus safety project. From a financial perspective, we have a project planned for ABOR reporting. We have 3 auditable entity projects scheduled focused on learning enterprise, global futures, and Herberger. And then we also have work planned for the P-card implementation going on this summer. From an IT project perspective, we have an Active Directory audit planned, as well as a firewall security project. And then, as I mentioned, we have quarterly procedures over P-card spend, as well as our continuous auditing program. With that, I'll pause, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you. So what is the strategic partner, OVG? How do you do the audit?
So when we do that, we'll look at the contract we have with OVG, so we'll audit contractual terms. We'll also look at the underlying business controls that are needed to ensure that we're achieving the objectives of what that strategic partner is meant for. So we'll cover both contractual terms as well as operational areas.
Okay, so do you have deliverables that you also audit from those?
It would depend on the agreement itself. So usually it'll be financial terms, terms and conditions of the contract, and then any of the operational controls. So we'll pull that in, the actual agreement, anything that would be related to that we would need to get from that third party or the ASU function that manages that relationship. And then the deliverable coming out of that is just our standard audit report for an assurance project.
Thank you. I have one more question. So you must have multiple strategic partners. So do you have a sample that you choose, or that specific because you see a problem? How does that work?
It's all of the above at times, right? So we have a population, and it kind of ebbs and flows based off of the environment of the university. As part of our risk assessment activities, I do extensive discussions, risk interviews across the university, and we'll utilize that feedback to help define what we're going to pull in for that review. We'll also factor where we're at in that agreement itself. So at times it makes sense to look at an agreement that potentially is going to be coming up to the RFP process in the next year or two to really assess performance at that point, gaps, things that should be considered in the RFP going forward.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Question, well, first comment, greatly appreciate, the due diligence to audit, navigate known risks, and certainly mitigate others. I guess the question would come, I heard something what keeps you up at night, but I would say, what would you rank as the top general risk or risks that you intend to encounter?
So top of the mind is obviously IT security. It could, because it covers all of our operations. So we do try to have different coverages specifically on central areas like Active Directory, which controls our core access through different areas to our IT information systems and also drives a lot of our departmental access. Perimeter, our firewall perimeter security audit, again, more from an enterprise perspective, just on those high-level controls to ensure that, security is in layers. And so we're going to try to look at some of our projects on the outside to make sure that they're strong enough. And then we drill down also on some of the applications through our other projects. From an operational perspective, top of the mind just with our recent environment, obviously campus safety and those areas. So again, we have a project on the plan this year focused on our threat assessment management team. Again, just how that process works and looking at that.
Okay. IT.
Can I have another question?
Of course you can, Sharmana.
So from the IT perspective, so I don't know how many servers or how do you handle your IT emails or the Active Directory, because you must have contracts with the government, contracts which is normal. And how do you manage that risk, or if that's only one type of Active Directory? Because the government, when you have a secret or TS, contract, which you must have on R&D or other countries now that you have the hub for SWAP 2. I don't know how that works. How do you manage that, and how is the risk, managing different type of security?
Sure. So from a risk perspective, going back to our auditable units, right, we'll have that high-level area. So I'll just say firewall securities or logical access is one auditable entity, right? But how it's applied across the university varies very greatly. Like, it's not meant to be a one-to-one, one auditable unit to one audit project. It all comes into that scoping, right? And so from the Active Directory perspective, the university is established to have different environments. We have multiple instances of Active Directory depending on the management who's managing those IT resources. So some of that may be managed centrally through our enterprise technology group. Some of it may be managed independently with our knowledge enterprise within our more secure, dedicated research space. Some of the colleges may also be managing that on their own. And so it really comes down to the scoping and then where we're going to focus those hours based off those risk discussions, feedback through the enterprise risk management. I meet regularly with our enterprise technology group. There's a member of our internal audit review board that represents enterprise technology. So it's looking at that collectively to know there's rarely going to be one set of IT controls that is just broad brush the same across the university. So then we just have to scope our projects to ensure that we're scoping it appropriately from a control ownership and a control responsibility perspective.
Yeah, thank you. And that is very complex.
I'll just add one thing to all of what Lisa just said, and that is that we actually have a special purpose entity called Assure that sits within Enterprise Partners, one of our affiliated entities, and there's more information on what exactly that is, the relationships, et cetera, in that affiliated entities report, the part of your materials. And that the sole purpose of that unit is to house some of the defense-related research that has the most significant restrictions and controls, so that, separation is one of the strategies there as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Team ASU, thank you. We'll let you go, but want to thank you for a very thorough presentation. Appreciate all that you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Here comes Team NAU. All right. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Brewster. Joined by Mark Rupert, our Chief Audit Executive, and Becky McGaw, AVP and Risk Manager, as well as the Department Head of our Contracting, Purchasing, and Risk Management Department. And we will go through the same topic areas that ASU just went through. So, let's see. Clicker. Go. We'll start off with the Internal Audit Review Board activity, and no changes in terms of the membership. You can see the names of the individuals and the areas that they represent. This group has had 4 meetings since last time, most recently beginning of May. Focus in on those meetings have been audit planning, reviewing audit reports, audit follow-ups, and it's a really good discussion in terms of having those cross-functional areas represented during those meetings, as well as input into the audit planning. We have had and discussions during those meetings. We've had 5 audits completed for the year. We've also, you'll see a chart that just shows 7 audit improvement opportunities that have been implemented. We also had the discussion related to the FY25 audit plan, as well as risks. I do want to just point out that many of the audits that have been completed have brought to the forefront improvement opportunities for better processes, better documentation, some of those things that certainly get prioritized lower when you have other more pressing needs, but certainly important nonetheless to make those process improvements just to improve effectiveness as well as efficiencies. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to give you a little bit more context in terms of our audit status.
Thanks, Bjorn. So I want to point out first, especially since this is a new audit committee and we meet once a year, all 3 internal audit shops are members of the Institute of Internal Auditors, and by our ABOR approved charters, we're required to follow the standards that are promulgated by the Institute of Internal Auditors. As Lisa mentioned, those standards will be updated. Those standards are principle focused and they're mandatory for our functions. The changes that are happening that are due in January 25, where all 3 of us are currently analyzing what that impact will be. We know there will be some changes. While a lot of the standard changes, we're reformatting and restructuring the standards in some ways more in line with what you might see in NIST and ISO from what they were before, just in terms of creating domains and that type of thing. There will be potential impacts on the board as well, because the standards have certain changes in requirements or expectations of boards and audit committees. So working through Rick, we will make any recommendations that we see to the board in that process. So with that, I'll continue with this. So looking at our status of our plan, we had some negative hits. Like Bjorn said, we had 5 audits issued. 4 of those really relate to carryover from the prior year plan. We did lose an auditor this year, which for us is 1/3 of the team, so that's why you see some deferral of projects, including IT security. We did just finalize our IT asset disposal process, which was the IT security audit that carried over from the prior year, so we continue to focus on ensuring we meet that requirement for IT security. Out of the audits we did complete, there were only 2 significant improvement opportunities identified, and that related to deferred maintenance, which is probably not a surprise. Deferred maintenance is a major issue. The challenges that we identified were there was really just a base level of funding that NAU was applying, and of course with the lack of state, that meant we had minimal dollars really focused on deferred maintenance. The other aspect was, given that situation, most of the deferred maintenance response is, how do we just keep buildings going in terms of what students and outward-facing folks need? So we felt there should be more of an intentional process in how you focus on ensuring that maintenance is addressed so that we pull the deferred maintenance liability down, essentially. So we have a deferred maintenance liability that seems to be increasing instead of being maintained stable. So those are the two outstanding. When I get to the next slide, you'll see those. In terms of what's outstanding, those two there's no follow-up yet because they're not expected to be implemented until the end of this calendar year. The other outstanding item relates to CERT, which was a two-part process. So the issue there is replacing our current conflict of interest system because the technology is outdated. We had the one part that the IRB agreed to accept the risk for. So ITS, our IT team, did a lot of work trying to address this particular security issue, and I don't want to get into details in a public session, but if you have questions during executive session, we can get in a little more detail. But after all those efforts, we would have had to replace that tool, and the goal is to not replace that tool. We want to move to a system that is third-party and something that can be maintained ongoing. So that process is still in place, trying to determine the actual system that will be replaced, which is why it's been outstanding for quite a while. We are a ServiceNow shop, if you're familiar with the ServiceNow platform. Right now, the focus is on looking at the conflict of interest module that is included in the ServiceNow suite. So that analysis is currently ongoing. And then moving on, just looking at total improvement opportunities, we did have 9 added and then 6 implemented during the year. Like Lisa noted, we have, I think like all of us probably have a lot more in the 360-day category. Most of those 15 relate to other aspects of the conflict of interest process that once that system's in place, a lot of those things, the dominoes will fall into place, and a lot of those will be identified. The other relate to our electronic physical security access. So we use a system called Linnell. A governance committee was put in place because we had both IT and facilities managing different aspects, and so the goal was to better coordinate that across the university so that as we implement the physical infrastructure, we're also dealing with the IT side of that in a better way. And then that's it. So any questions, comments on this
Just
part
one
of the
from-
presentation?
One from my standpoint would be the 2 that you have pegged to end December this year.
Correct.
Parallel path, you got the resources to get those done. You kind of have, anytime I see a couple projects finishing same year, same time frame, it doesn't mean there isn't conflict going back and forth or resource allocation, but you feel like those will be completed?
I mean, that is the plan, so, yes.
Okay.
And if I may, I'll just add that portion of that is better documentation and process, and as well as resourcing. So part of the resourcing aspect is being able to identify funds. As Mark alluded to, being able to identify within a capital project not only funds for deferred maintenance as part of a larger project. So we might have a capital project that is, for instance, $10 million. It might be encompassing of deferred maintenance items, but harder to identify specifically what portion is deferred maintenance of a larger project. So part of it is reporting, part of it is then just process documentation. So yes, they're on parallel paths, and they're really independent parallel paths that are not, dependent upon one being done prior to another. So I think we feel confident that, by December, both of them, in terms of process documentation, process improvement, can be finished.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Sure, go.
I'm
sorry, just read
Am I a
the
member of
call.
the committee? Can I ask a question?
Well,
You can't ask a
You're not,
question.
You are
you're not a member of the
You are a
committee, but
regent
you
and are
can,
happy to ask committee.
thank you.
You can ask a
Yeah,
question,
Pacheco's
you just
not here.
can't vote.
You may ask.
Yeah.
Goodness.
The subject of
You're a
deferred
regent.
maintenance obviously grabbed my attention, so I'd like to understand a little bit more about it. So I think all campuses have indicated that their deferred maintenance is growing and growing. Walk me through the dynamics of that in a couple of areas. One, are we pulling any buildings out of use? 2, are there regular assessments of risk in terms of a catastrophic event, a roof falling, of something of that kind? 3rd, do our insurance premiums go up? What are the manifestations of managing a growing deferred maintenance portfolio?
You want me to go, or?
I can, let me go first, and then I'll turn it over to Becky, especially for the third portion, because she really interacts with the state in terms of state insurance and state risk. But Regent Duval, we have a cycle for facility condition assessments. We will be finishing all of our buildings now, and they will be up to date by the end of this fiscal year, and all of them will be now on a 4-year cycle. So we saw a pretty significant jump about 2 years ago when we had, for the very first time, all of our residence halls completed at the same time. Before, it was do a few, do a few, do a few. So we have seen some significant jumps here over the past couple of years as we've gotten onto a 4-year facility condition assessment cycle. So that looks largely at mechanical and structural issues within a facility. So that helps, take a look at what the assessments are. Obviously, there's inflation factors that are applied to those. So in this environment, that is you're always kind of running to try to catch up, to that increasing number. I think just in terms of your very first question, how to manage that, yes, there are buildings that do come off. I've alluded to for this committee with our campus master plan, the demolition of the Granny's Closet building. That took off several $1 million from our deferred maintenance number in July. So that reduction related to that demolition will be seen in the next deferred maintenance number. As we make improvements through capital projects in systems, whether it's HVAC, those do come off that deferred maintenance cycle. So it is kind of a, you make some improvements, you have another assessment come through, in 4 years, that might add some more projects, to that. You've got inflation factors. So it is kind of a add and subtraction type process. So did that answer your first 2 questions?
Yeah, I think so. And then the question of insurance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for insurance, we are self-insured through state risk, ADOA. So along with all the other state agencies, our insurance premiums are part of those factors of everybody's claims experiences through that. And we are, our premium is based on our claims experience. We do submit a building report every year that they use that factors in, and it has the year of our buildings, and it has the assessed value of our buildings, or a formula they use to determine the value of the buildings, and that's all factored into our premium. So I don't know really how the deferred maintenance is factored into that insurance premium, but I do know it's mostly based on our claims experience.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Team NAU?
So the update for NAU's ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, process is one that Becky will largely give. And, the 3 of us were here last year to provide an update. And the process is pretty consistent with what we had shared last year, with a couple updates that Becky will review.
Thank you, Bjorn. This year, NAU formally aligned enterprise risk management with strategic planning through a collaboration between our Enterprise Risk Management Oversight Committee and our University Strategic Planning Advisory Board. Our 2025 Elevating Excellence is NAU's strategic roadmap. It has 7 priorities. You can see them up on the screen: academic excellence, student success, and so on. Each of those priorities has multiple objectives that are supported by action plans. And this year, NAU identified its risks through a survey tool that all of the NAU cabinet members and their direct reports completed. Those risks were evaluated, and it was confirmed that NAU's top risks remained unchanged. Risks are assessed for impact and likelihood to determine the extent of monitoring that's required. A heat map is used for ease of visual reference. So those Risks that have a high impact and high likelihood of occurrence are continually reviewed. Risks that have a high impact and a low likelihood of occurring are continuously monitored. Risks that have a low impact but a high likelihood of occurring are periodically reviewed. And those risks that are both low impact and have a low likelihood of occurring are periodically monitored. NAU's risk oversight essentially has 4 elements: the president's leadership team, which is informed by university-wide advisory boards, such as the strategic planning board I mentioned just a minute ago; risk oversight groups, such as enterprise risk management oversight and the emergency management advisory group. Certain functions have been centralized to include talent management, purchasing, and information technology. And our final element are compliance functions, and those include HIPAA, Title IX, and IT security controls. And that concludes the update of our enterprise risk management process, and I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions? Comments? Job well done. Thank you.
I think it's back to me.
Back to audit.
Okay, so fiscal 25 audit plan. You want to know about risk assessment? I'm kind of going to get to that a little bit later, but we are very involved in the ERM process. I'm essentially sort of the secretary to the ERM Oversight Committee and the lead in the risk work group, so doing the identification, doing the analysis, providing that feedback to the ERM group, and then we work through the IARB. Using our audit universe, we say, okay, well, if these are the top risks identified for ERM, what projects might fit into that in the coming year? We then work with the IRB, and we actually do a voting process so that we may make a list of 3 to 4 times as many audits as we could possibly complete with resources. We then get the internal audit review board's input on which of those make the most sense. With my agreement, then we propose the audit plan that is here today. So, So this is the basic breakout of resources. So 70% of the plan is basically planned audits, assurance work, and consulting. And then we have 5% audit follow-up, and then allocation for special projects and investigations. Part of that is the ERM work that I do or that my team supports as well, and then training and administration, of course. And then looking at the direct time, so the direct hours relate to doing actual audit work, consulting work, and so on is the bulk of the plan, as you can see here, versus indirect hours. And then looking at audit assurance in relation to consulting. Again, we're primarily focused on assurance work, but we do try to include a few consulting projects each year as well. And then I also like to say that the audit process itself is consulting in the sense that we don't just make a recommendation and say, deal with it. We try to work with management, come up with a solution that we both agree will address the control impact, efficiency of change, whatever the case may be, so that when we bring that to you as a committee, we're in agreement. Obviously, if there's ever a situation where we don't agree, that would come before this committee for your decision and input on what you think should be done given the risk at hand. From there, this is the list of planned projects for the year. So we continue to use an NCAA compliance audit cycle of every 3 years. We audit against all the bylaws in thirds, essentially, for the first 3 years, and then we have a 4th year where we give athletics a break, and then we start that cycle again. And this past year, we're actually in the process of wrapping up also an athletic ticket process audit, so that would be more outside of the NCAA compliance. There are some compliance requirements, but it's more of a financial and process-oriented audit. IT security, we will focus on change management. HR and affiliate management audit, we did look at affiliate management in terms of the IT side when we did an access management audit a couple years back. So this will really focus on the operational side of how those affiliates are managed. In the finance arena, cash, and then the Research Institutional Biosafety Committee. Consulting projects, we want to look at donor stewardship, how well the type of controls and processes we have in place to ensure that the donations we received are actually used in compliance with the donor's wishes. We started a fraud risk assessment process 2 years ago. We continue to cycle through departments, updating that fraud risk assessment process. One of the things identified in our ERM process this year were certain risks related to our statewide campuses. So we're going to dig deep into that as a consulting project to support the ERM approach this year. And then aligning those with our top risks, which we'll get into more detail in executive session, but you can see the top risks where each of these projects fall. I'll let that sit there for a while for consideration, and I believe that should be the last. Oh, final, some strategic priorities. We talked about the quality assurance piece. We are actually due, so one other aspect of quality assurance and complying with the Institute of Internal Auditor Standards is every 5 years we have to go through a peer review process. We are due in fiscal 26, fall of 25, so our QAR will actually assess us against the new standards. So this year is a very important year for us to get all of those changes in place so that we are well prepared. Obviously, trying to fill our auditor recruiting position, and then improving overall audit plan completion in terms of just the overall project, and then a focus on data analytics, especially use of AI. We've been using a lot of AI to support ERM work, some audit work, but we want to continue to focus on that. And then on the ERM side, we're working on a maturity model that's specific to NAU so we can focus our efforts on how we want to continue to grow the ERM program. And then automation. So right now, everything we do with ERM is on spreadsheets. So we are looking at automated tools to improve that process. So I'll open up for questions.
Quick question, same resource question, down one. Process to go find that new team member, that expert. Is that a wide-ranging look for that individual, or is that an internal university look?
Or open it up for internal, yes. And it'd be wide-ranging. The last time we had this position open, it took over a year to fill the position. So recruiting in Flagstaff is a little bit difficult. So in the plan, we actually adjusted our resources and are assuming that we will have 40% FTE for that position in how we calculated and determine what audit projects we can complete next year. So I don't know if that answers the full question, but.
Just trying to find the field you're looking in. Any other comments, questions from the regents? Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, we'll play table transition. U of A, team, you're up. Hey, I see the same picture through the bushes there.
I like that picture, sir.
Covert, yeah, it's a covert picture.
Mr. Chair, members of the Audit Committee, appreciate the opportunity to update you today on risk management and our audit plan. I'm joined with Miguel Delgado, who's our risk manager, and Sarah Click, who's our chief auditor. I'm going to turn this over to them with no additional comments, and they will walk you through the presentation. I will be happy to weigh in on any questions that you have coming forward. So please go ahead.
Sure.
There's the
Clicker's right between you.
That's a lot of pressure John just put on us. We'll manage.
I can put more. That seemed pretty light.
Well, first off, I would like to just quickly express some appreciation for ABOR, for the support staff, and for the regents here. I'm guessing that being a regent is sort of a thankless job. I'm assuming when you see someone approaching you that knows you're a regent, it's probably not to shake your hand and say thank you. It's probably to share a piece of their mind about some issues. So I do want to just say thank you for serving and for the support that you provide continuously to the university. The three universities, the three valuable and great universities that we have here in the state of Arizona. Well, at the University of Arizona, much of how we approach enterprise risk management, you're not going to hear anything that varies too differently from what was presented by ASU and NAU. Those were both excellent presentations, so I enjoyed getting to hear those. Hop to the next slide here. So one of the core concepts, and again, this will be the third time you've heard this today, but one of the core concepts of an ERM framework is something that you would call a risk register. A risk register is really just a fancy way of saying make a list of all the risks that you can identify. The starting point, as ASU pointed out, is that identification process, which in large institutions can certainly, it's a long process. You start to make that list and identify risks, and it's like the list it kind of looks like my Costco shopping list. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. So that list can really turn into several hundred risks, which certainly creates a challenge as you try to sort through those and figure out, okay, where do we, direct our resources? So sort of the starting point is to figure out what risks you have. Any large, complex institution is going to have a number of risks to think about. And so to help sort of sort out that list, what we've done is we've identified, again, part of the framework is 6 overarching buckets that we would look to. Most of the time, as you go through your list of risks, you can find a specific bucket that you would sort of place that risk in. Some risks obviously are going to go in more than one bucket, just by nature of what kind of event could come out of the risk. But it's just a visual way to sort of segment the risks out and think of them in terms of at a high level, where they fit in the institution. But I think more importantly, the value of this exercise is you start to see, again, has been pointed out, by ASU and NAU, the interconnectedness between the buckets. And you could have an event that arises in one of these buckets, and you start to draw those connections and quickly understand that something that perhaps arises out of an operational event, an operational issue, can quickly become a financial concern. I think at the heart of everything we do, we're cognizant of our reputation, the brand that each university has, and the value of that name. Those risks can end up, of course, causing strategic challenges in terms of accomplishing the overall mission. So, on a fundamental level, the real value here is stepping back, taking a high-level approach, bringing in the right people, and then looking at how we are gonna sort through the risk register. So on the next slide here, again, not something that you have not seen today, but one of the tough questions that sort of arises as you have these discussions is, which risks are the most important? If you are going to sort of pick and choose and say that one risk takes precedence or priority over another risk, what's the methodology for doing that? How do you explain? And again, it's a tough question at times, and sometimes the right answer is all. Sometimes the right answer is both. I think I would contend that all of these risks that we've identified deserve some level of attention to make sure that we have processes and controls and things of that nature in place. But as we analyze a particular risk, we look at 4 things. We look at the likelihood of the risk. That's the Y axis on the graph here. We look at the impact, the potential impact of the risk, which is on the X axis. And then the other things we really try to drill down on is who should be the owner of that risk? What does ownership look like? What does oversight look like? Again, just ensuring that the person that actually has the institutional foresight, knowledge, authority, kind of a blend of those things, can actually effectuate change in those areas. So that's sort of how we sort of suss this part of the process out. And as others have pointed out, this is essentially a heat map. Based on where the dot falls, we sort of decide where to direct resources and attention through this process. And the goal, of course, is really not to have anything up in the far right corner, but just by virtue of the inherent risk that's associated with different endeavors, things somehow find their way up in that upper right-hand corner, despite the mitigation efforts that you may choose to implement. Some of you may be familiar with the Japanese business term Kaizen, which deals with a culture of continuous improvement. I think that's very much something we focus on in our ERM efforts. But there's also another component to that called a Kaizen event, when you essentially stop everything if you can. I know that's certainly not possible at the university to ever stop operations, but the intent there is that you sort of call a timeout and you put all the resources you can into solving a problem. And that's sort of some of the work that this committee works on. The things that we've seen the past few years, there's a lot of things that have ended up in that upper right-hand corner, and in response, we have tried to direct resources and energy and attention at trying to solve those problems. In terms of the committee that we use to sort of carry out this ERM process, this gives you an idea of how we have strategically selected members for the committee. As I think about this slide, one of the visual pictures that kind of comes to my mind, if you've ever been to Tucson, you know, the backdrop for the city is the beautiful Santa Catalina Mountains. It's one of the things that I love about living in Tucson. We may not have anything that resembles a functional freeway system like you do here in Phoenix, but we do have beautiful mountains to look at every day. But one of the most interesting things to me about the Catalina Mountains is, as you traverse around the city of Tucson, they look different. They look different based on where you are in the city. I live in Oro Valley, and it looks like a completely different mountain range. So my point here is that as you take a different vantage point, the view looks different, right? So as we look at these risks, every person on our committee here is going to look at a particular risk, and they're going to look at it through a lens, through their unique skill set and experience and kind of where they sit in the institution. And what that really does is just allow us to have that diversity of thought, to avoid groupthink. It allows us to perhaps identify new risks that the committee was not aware of. It also helps us to maybe see solutions that perhaps could not be viewed through, the single focal lens that I may be looking through. So I feel like that's, really the value in having this cross-functional committee. And as you can see here, we have key partners on here. Sarah's one of our members. All members are at the AVP level or higher within the institution, which again provides us the ability to drill down and actually influence policy or procedures that perhaps need to be adjusted from time to time. I think I'll close this portion by just saying that we don't want ERM to simply be something that sounds good in theory. It always sounds good in theory, right? I think the hope for us is that we can actually do something that contributes to the collective success and achievement of the university. As much as possible, we try to marry the goals of our ERM process with the strategic mission of the university, and it's something that we take seriously, but I will say that we have a lot of fun at these meetings as well, and sort of have a culture of levity in how we try to solve very complex problems at a very large, complex institution. Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a walk down FY24. It's been a year. We started the year with 4 FTE, and we had an opening that we knew that we would have to recruit for. By now the end of the year, we're 3 FTE, and we were heavily recruiting for both positions in the fall, and then the hiring freeze was announced. So we're 3 FTE. But what we did manage to do is issue 5 reports. And we were able to work with management and get 12 open improvement opportunities remediated. In those 5 reports, though, there were 3 that had red or significant improvement opportunities. 1 has since been remediated, and 4 remain open. 2 from the vendor management report, and we just issued that one at the nick of time to get it into the deadline for this meeting. But both of those red items are due to be implemented this summer, so we haven't really done any follow-up with them yet. The other 2 open red items are from the College of Science IT General Controls Review report, and those 2 summarized issues represent 271 detailed improvement opportunities. Initially, the auditor gave me the report, and it had everything. I said, no, nobody's going to read this. Summarize them, but continue to follow up on the detailed opportunities. So he's made good progress. Well, the college had made good progress implementing them. From the 271 that they started with, there are 56 detailed improvement opportunities that remain to be remediated. So that's 21%. So that's over 70% have already been remediated, which is good. His last follow-up attempt, he noticed a little bit of delay because right in the middle of his follow-up, the IT centralization occurred March 4th. So as they're getting their hands around that, that's possibly delayed it a little bit, but they say they're still on track
to have everything remediated by their original target date, which was next July 2025. So with the staffing, there were a lot of changes that had to be made to the planned audit committee, so the IRB was kept very busy. In total, they approved 11 project changes to the plan. Remember, we had a bunch of old stuff on the plan that we were working to get out the door. So they agreed to postpone 7, cancel 1, and the one that was canceled was an annual recurring audit, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. So the FY24 audit was canceled. And 3 were closed. There isn't a single, all 3 closure reasons are all different. If you care to read what happened, I've detailed the reasons, specific reasons on the materials. So with that, all those changes, we have 4 audits that are nearing completion that we're working diligently to get completed. 3 are in the report writing phase, and 1 is finalizing field work. We had to play a little hardball with the construction contractor and say, you've got one last chance. It's taken forever to get information. This is your last chance. We got to wrap it up. So you either agree to provide the information, or we're going to assume it doesn't exist and we're going to move on, and that'll be it. Because they've had plenty of opportunity. So the team is working very diligently to get those 4 wrapped up. Follow-up, the IARB has been keenly interested in open items that remain open for extended periods of time. Like if the original target date comes and they push it, it's been very nice to be able to refer to to use them as leverage, actually, when we're working with the units, and they don't want to, they can't possibly do this that they said they were going to do. They have to push it out. And we can just gently say, well, you know, the Internal Audit Review Board is very interested in follow-up items, and we're going to have to report this to them. And suddenly they make some progress. With the membership of the IARB this year, they were able to actually affect change and get some of the older 360-plus day open items moving, which was very nice. So I think that's it on the 24 highlights, the year that's almost over. I'm happy to answer any questions if any of you have them, or if not, I'll move right into 25. Okay, I'll move into 25. How do we? Oh, okay, perfect. I'm not allowed to use the remote at home anyway. So let's talk about 25. We're a little bit more optimistic for 25. When we came up with the plan, I talked to John, and we created the plan based on current staffing. The thought process was, let's do the plan based on current staffing, and then if during the year we're able to add to staff or we're able to recruit, then we'll go back to the IARB and we'll make changes to the plan accordingly. But when you go back to the IARB, because you're looking to add staff and you're going to add some audits, it's not just the audits that you're going to change. All of a sudden, the time between direct and indirect changes because you now have to have your team working on recruitment activities, whereas our plan doesn't have any recruitment activities. It's strictly audits. We're working them hard. So on our plan, we've got, and let me back up a little bit. So our multi-year plan is buckets of audits, and it's only high-risk areas. We don't have any low risk on there because we're never going to get to them anyway. And if it rises to the level of a high risk, it'll make it to the bucket of risk category. So we looked at the staffing. We looked at the audits that were postponed. We looked at the initiatives that are happening on campus. HR centralization, auxiliary accounting centralization, and they're working on process improvements, and then the IT centralization. So we looked at all that and decided, well, we don't want to get in the middle of any of that while they're actively making changes. We would rather come in after the changes have been made, and we'll look at it then. And then we looked at our staffing. How many audits do we think that we can realistically get done, because we need to come back next year and have a clean slate that looks better than the one you saw for '24. So on our plan, we've got 5 audits, an affiliation agreement audit, we've got contract audit, a master sublease, a construction audit, old chemistry building renovation, an institutional process, designated campus colleagues. And we like institutional process because it covers the campus as a whole. It isn't just focused on one particular unit, but it's a process that impacts the entire campus. And then the required IT security audit will be security awareness training. Also on the plan is a system, let me get it right, a system implementation advisory role. And what this would entail was our IT auditor would work with the implementation team for the system that's being implemented and kind of be embedded in the team to make sure that discussions on best practices and controls are considered while the system is being implemented, when they're cheaper and easier to implement, than after the system is rolled out and it's impossible to add those. So we have found good luck on prior implementations with having him in there. So that's one of the items on our plan, plus more follow-up audit, to make sure that the prior audits, the identified weaknesses, that they get resolved, that they don't just roll forever. And then, as you've heard previously, the quality assurance and improvement program, working to implement those new changes. Because when we have our quality assessment review, it'll be based on these new standards. So we have to make sure that we didn't dotted all the i's, crossed all the t's, so we don't get written up for that. And that is it. Let me talk about how the items came, another reason they came to be on the plan. So as Miguel mentioned, I am a member of the University Risk Oversight Committee, and I attended the meeting, and as the committee members were talking about the risk categories, I'm thinking, oh, yep, we have that on our multi-year plan. Yep, we have that on our, so our multi-year plan dovetailed quite nicely with the categories. And then in every IARB meeting, there was a discussion of risk. So the IARB was heavily involved in approving the audits that made sense to move forward based on risk. And I look forward to their continued involvement, John. So, and that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
One from me, sir. When you think beyond the staffing issue that, clearly you've articulated here, are there any other areas to focus on that would help accelerate some of the audit status we have from '24 and the 5 you've got laid out here? Is there anything that we could do differently beyond staffing right now to kind of move some of those audits outcomes forward?
I'm working them hard, and they're making very good progress. I think part of what happened with the staffing is not only were the bodies not there, but with such a small staff, I always like to make sure that the team is involved in the recruitment process. And that took a little bit more time than I thought, but we were trying to get the best candidates that we could. We had over 50 applications for the auditor position. So there isn't any of that occurring. It's strictly focused on let's do the audits, do the work, reports out.
Okay. Well, I'd love to, going forward, if there's anything that comes up that we could look at that would help accelerate some of those beyond the staffing, and I know that's a focus area, but anything that we can do, outsourcing, you know, I guess I would be open to hear some of those options that might accelerate some of those.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you to all our presenters, and, you know, kind of concluding our university report out, are there any final questions from anybody relative to the three universities? All right, if there are none, I'm going to move that we approve the internal auditor's audit plans. Can I entertain a motion to approve the internal auditor's audit plans? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. With that second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, everyone. We are in a carry situation, and after presentation, clarify the motion regarding minutes. Okay. Brad, let's go ahead.
So if I could trouble you, Chair.
You may.
Chair Mata, it looks like we need to do some clarifications to our prior motions to approve minutes from previous meetings. So I'm going to ask the board to hear that motion again slightly more clearly and to repeat their vote.
Oh.
Thank you for
The committee, okay?
supporting it.
I move that the audit committee approve the amended May 26, 2022 public session minutes, the May 26, 2022 executive session minutes, and the public and executive session minutes for the June 1st, 2023 meeting. Okay. Is there a second? From the committee, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? If not, the motion is carried. The meeting can now adjourn, and we can move to executive session. Thank you to everybody. Yes?
Motion for executive session.
That's sure, I get to do that. Can we have a motion to move to executive session? Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Here, Doug. It passes. We'll move to executive session.